Welcome, everybody. We have a full complement today. Brad and Ofer and Judy and Dave and myself, Bill, and we're going to proceed. We're going to start today on the chapter in Missing Link, the living in the now. And Brad, I think you were going to start with this today.
Yeah. Living in the now. Through the centuries, the wise have told us to live in the now. This is why I say to you, the past is a ghost that cannot be held in the palm of your hand. The future cannot be grasped, no matter how desirable or enticing it may appear. Nor can the present be held, no matter how beautiful or exciting.
Wow. So simple yet so profound. Huh?
Yeah, he covers all three right there so beautifully about
Right.
just showing us in that just in the first page, where each of those fall into and how we kind of end up trying to grasp for them in different places. So great reminder.
Right.
Yeah, this has been one of the most powerful, these little 3 paragraphs have been very powerful for a lot of the veterans I have that have struggled with PTSD. Because the past is so real to them.
Yeah.
And, the idea that the past is a ghost is shocking sometimes, when we first talk about it. And yet it makes perfect sense, that you can't, the only way you could call it up is like trying to call up a dead relative, So.
Yeah.
And sometimes it calls up itself, as I'm sure you will say here, and that's
Right.
when the challenge is. I don't know if anybody wants to make any further comments about that before, or Ofer, before you go forward. Okay.
I like what he said when he said also in the end, nor can the present be held, no matter how beautiful or exciting.
Right.
Because I think that it's like thinking about the past and the future. It's like obvious in a way,
Yeah.
but we don't always understand that even when we're in the present, we think we're in the present, but actually we're not.
Well, it's over pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always think of the kaleidoscope as a child, where no matter how well you tried to hold the kaleidoscope quietly, it always kept changing.
Yeah.
That's the way life is, moment to moment. Okay, Ofer?
Should I read?
Sure.
Okay, so begin the process of nourishing the soul by living in the now. Forget the past and the future, and just be. And you will surely be rewarded by living in the now. When Eastern mystics describe the now, they are not talking about today as a specific day of the month and year. Their meaning goes deeper. When such people refer to the now, they mean the personal mind is free from the contaminants of yesterday's memories and fears.
Yeah, he's talking about now as the thought that we're having right now. And it's interesting. It's interesting.
Ofer, I can't help but remember, and it's your story, but the story that you've told earlier in the course, where you were in Barcelona and you walked out of the airport and the fireworks were going off and the explosions, and you had somehow you had this incredibly disturbing physical experience and emotional, but there was something that allowed, some understanding that allowed you to just drop to the curb, as I remember, and be in the now, and to go through that experience with much more grace than I think most people think is generally possible. I don't know if you wanted to comment on that. Or...
I think that if you try to take this experience and refer to it through the context of what we just read, so in a way, when he says when such people refer to the now, they mean the personal mind is free from the contaminants of yesterday memories and fears. So in a way, I had the physical sensations, and I was sweating and everything, but I wasn't connecting it to any, at least after a few moments, I wasn't connecting it to anything that happened in the past. So it just became like sensations. And after a while, my thinking about those sensations changed. So what at first what I felt as arousal was fear. After my thinking changed about it, it became excitement. So, you know, did that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, see, from a neuroscience standpoint, our brain has a very rapid system that takes in information and makes interpretations. But it's good thing about it is it is very, very fast. The bad thing is that it's not always accurate.
Yeah.
So you're just that's why policemen sometimes in a stressed state of mind mistake a cell phone or a billfold for a pistol, and they shoot people because because it's inaccurate. And so your brain, when it experienced through the senses the explosions, it immediately went to your past experiences and prepared you for escape, for battle, for whatever. But that was totally unconscious. I mean, it wasn't you thinking that up. It was just an unconscious response. And many of our thoughts are unconscious. We only experience them via the physical and emotional feelings that we experience via thought, you know. But anyway, but you knew something that allowed you to not go down the rabbit hole with the experience. I don't.
Yeah.
No, I should have just.
I can't say it always happens.
No, you can't say it always happens.
What?
Yeah.
You said you can't say that it always happens.
Yeah, sometimes I think, you know, I think that's why consciousness is consciousness, not consciousness. I mean, level of consciousness, you know, sometimes people describe it as mood, but that's, you know, when I hear people speak about it, sometimes they refer to it as mood, and it's not so accurate the way I see it. It was like I was freaking out, but I was in a high state of consciousness. So I was able to not be identified with my experience.
Yes, yes.
But it doesn't mean I was feeling like calm or
Right.
like in a good mood, you know?
But I think that's beautiful that you weren't identifying with your experience.
Yeah.
No.
You know, it's funny. I've often used the expression that for years I've told people that consciousness is the doorway to experience and the window to the soul. And what I think is when we're in a higher, quieter state of mind, a higher level of consciousness, we can see both. We can look out the door and see the window to the soul and realize, you know, that where we are, you know, that our consciousness is bringing us both the present moment and our memories.
Wow. Wow. So say that the two things again, Judy. I think that's beautiful.
It's the doorway to the present and the window to the soul.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
So
Love that.
That's beautiful.
But sometimes we can only see one way or the other. We can only see out the door, you know, because we're not, it's not broad enough. We're not quiet enough to see, oh, wait. Yeah.
Right. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you want to go forward?
Yeah. Is it my turn? Okay. This in turn frees the mind to see with clarity things as they are, not through distorted memories and apprehensions. Living in the now requires a clear mind. In clearing our minds, we may have to give up something to receive something. If you wanted to replace a glass of stale wine with fresh wine, first you must pour out the old wine. It is the same with clearing our minds of unwanted, stale thoughts.
It sounds like a doing, but you guys could comment better than I, but I don't experience it as a doing when it occurs. it seems like it's a natural thing for the mind to clear when I don't try to clear it. I don't know.
I think,
Well, I think to me, when he says to give up something, it's more like you just let go.
Uh-huh.
It's like you leave it alone. And
Right.
because if you hang on to it, if you keep the old wine in the glass, you
Right.
can't get any new wine. But if you just let it go, then there's room.
Both David and Ofer had comments. Go ahead, one of you.
after you.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that for me, the wine bit is the confusing bit, because the only way to get rid of wine from a glass is to pour it out, and that is a doing activity. But I think it's more noticing that you're stuck on a piece of on some old thought, and acknowledging it for what it is, but then you don't need to do anything for that to clear. But by being aware that you're stuck, or that you have been stuck, is a really helpful thing to notice. And at that point,
Metaphorically, the awareness tips the wine glass and allows
yeah, absolutely. So it's catching on to the fact that you're drinking stale wine, and then you can chuck it, I suppose.
Yeah.
So it's that awareness of, oh right, I've been stuck again, and that's not a problem. That's just how it is at the moment, and it will pass. But the more you see that you've been stuck on something, the easier that transition happens, and there is no requirement to do anything for that to take place. It's just natural.
Ofer, your thoughts?
Actually, I wanted to say kind of like what David said, only maybe in different words, but maybe for me, I agree with what David said, and I also want to add that for me, maybe pouring out stale wine is to understand that, when people are guys with PTSD, they usually have a very catastrophical way of thinking.
Right.
Like you always expect the worst, and you always, it's not even something that you notice that you do, you just do it all the time. So in a way, it's like admitting that you don't actually know what's going to happen. So you let go of your, because your experience tells you that everything that can go wrong will go wrong. But so you have to give it up in order to experience something new.
Interesting. So one of the things you give up is you stop filling in the blanks, knowing that the blanks are going to be filled up, but not, you don't have to fill them up yourself, or.
It's like when you go for me, PTSD, it's like going around in the world feeling insecure. So it's not only insecure about events, it's insecure about relationship, about people. You generalize it all over. So in a way, it kind of it affects your relationships, it affects how you go in the world. And that insecurity stems from fear, which is the stale wine, because at least that's how I see it. And you need to let go of that fear if you want to start having a new experience. And I think for people with PTSD, that's kind of it's not always easy, because they don't even know they are holding on to fear.
Yeah, it's interesting that I really appreciate your saying that, because I've spent a good part of today trying to write about that, to write about the fact that to some degree, people in preparing to be in the military and preparing to be are trained to pay attention to their insecure thinking, because that's how you keep yourself from getting killed.
Yeah.
And are trained to not think too much, to just follow their training, follow what they've been taught to do, and do it on automatic pilot. And that doesn't work in real life. It works in certain situations, but it doesn't work, like when you're going to the grocery store and playing with your kids, or things like that. And so to some degree, there's a mindset. There's both a state of mind and a mindset. That's what I'm kind of working through now. So the state of mind allows you to let go of the mindset. If your state of mind, if your level of consciousness is higher, you can see the mindset when it's appropriate, when it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And if you're stuck in it, you can't see that you could let it go.
Yeah. Yeah, I think also this thing about, I really realized for me was when I started seeing how much every situation, because of my training and being responsible for what I was responsible for, I had always looking at the worst case scenario.
Right.
Always going to the worst case scenario to say, what can I do to prepare to think our way so I can prepare to go in and shift in a different direction.
Right.
And it just ended up being this whole way of seeing everything.
Yeah.
Which is what Ofer was talking about. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly what he was
Right.
talking about. Yeah. And it's just, you know, because I was just thinking I've got to be able to see this to keep everybody safe and the
Right.
assets and everything going, you know, the mission. So yeah, it was in everything. It permeated every part of my life until I started seeing the principles. It shifted
Yeah.
it.
I think what's important to state is that, and it's like something that you, Bill, said, that it's not a matter of doing. Sometimes you can't actually do it. Sometimes it's just about waiting for an insight to come.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I, you know, to me, it's hard. That's hard to talk about. How do you wait for an insight? To me, it's the essence of this chapter. I tell people that because I used to say things like allow your mind to quiet, but that's like doing something too, or trying to do something. And what I've come to, and I welcome comments, is that when and I haven't had the experiences that three of you have had here, but when I am find myself in a troubled state of thinking, I find that the best that I can describe it is just to get present in my life as best as I can without judgment. And so what I say, like if I get into my life and I go and my brain says, you know, Bill, you're at a 3 out of 10 right now, and you're supposed to be this great teacher of the principles. If I start bitching to myself that I'm at a 3 out of 10, I'm headed for a 2, and then a 1, and then the basement. But when I hear in that my brain comment that I'm at a 3 out of 10, and I go, yeah, you know what? I'm going to be the best damn 3 I can be. As best as I can, I'm going to be the best 3. And just that acknowledgement, that accepting that I'm at a 3 out of 10, fully accepting it, I'm on the way to a 4 already. I don't know. I'd like to hear if other people, if that resonates, or if that resonates with your own experience.
It absolutely does. I was speaking to a guy this morning who has had a bit of a rough weekend. Regimentally, we lost another lad this weekend who killed himself. And there were another couple that disappeared off the radar, and the police got involved, and we managed to track them down, and they're okay. But he's been struggling with his own bits and pieces, and this sort of knocked him a little bit because there's another friend that's not around anymore, and that was all a bit hard. But this lad I was speaking to today is absolutely lovely. He gives the best advice ever to the people around him, but he doesn't necessarily do that for himself. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, you know, and he loves going to the gym. He's a very fit guy, but you know, when he's physically ill, he's damaged himself, or he's got a cold, he knows he's not going to be do as well at the gym, and he gives himself that bit of slack. But he doesn't necessarily do that with himself mentally. And I said, well, acknowledging the fact that you're only 60% today of where you normally are, well, that's okay. Go into the day going, cool, let's try and do the best 60% you can. And maybe even tell people at work that I'm feeling a bit low today, and I'm probably at this sort of level, so you might not get the best of me. And that takes a load of pressure off. And it just gave him a massive smile from looking really down in the dumps to having a bit, because he could see the truth in it for himself, and that he probably is his own worst critic, and that he needs to give himself a little bit of extra slack at times, to weather whatever storm he's going through at that moment. And it certainly lifted him this morning, which was great. But that was because he saw how true that was for himself.
Right. That's really beautiful.
Great.
I think that the other two things that I think of when I'm in that state is to remember that I have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. and to check twice before anything comes out my mouth. And same way with my hands. Keep them under my legs until make sure that what I'm going to do with them is not hurtful to myself or anyone else. Shall we go forward here?
Yeah.
Sure.
David?
Yeah, sorry. We must rid ourselves of yesterday's negative thoughts to receive today's new and positive feelings. I do not ask anyone to ignore their past experiences. This would be denial, and denial is not a healthy state. Instead, seek a clear understanding of the past. Realize that the negative feelings and emotions from the past traumatic experiences are no longer true. They are merely memories, a collection of old, stale thoughts. And for me, because of the way certainly with PTSD, the immediacy of the thoughts when they come back and how real they feel to the time, even though sometimes it's 10, 12, 20 years in the past, it feels just as fresh as it did. It's really difficult for people to get to grips with this point. But when they do, it's a real eye-opener. So it's noticing that you're safe at the moment, and actually it is a memory playing out. As horrible as it might feel right now, it isn't true anymore. And therefore it can't hurt you unless you start engaging with it and feeling you have no control. And by control, I mean the fact that you have every opportunity for this to stop as quickly as it started. Not that you need to do anything to control it. It's just, it's here now. I don't like it. It will pass. It will pass, and I don't need to do anything to stop it, because a fresh thought will come at some stage. And it might mean that I need to just get in the fact that I'm feeling a bit rubbish at the moment. That's okay. Feeling rubbish at any moment in time is okay, but it will pass, and you don't have to do anything to get it to stop. And just noticing that you're safe is sort of key to that, and knowing that it's therefore not real now. And it comes back to that acknowledging that that the moment that you're currently in, I suppose.
Yeah, it's funny. I had an experience just the other day where I was in the car listening to the radio, and a song came on that happened to coincide with a really painful experience in my past. And all of a sudden, I just started crying. I'm driving my car, and this song comes on, and I start crying, and I started feeling really terrible. And so I was on my way to the grocery store. I remember just sitting there in the car at a stoplight thinking, this is ridiculous. What am I doing to myself? But I couldn't stop. So I thought, well, it's okay to cry. And I just kept driving. I got some Kleenex, and by the time I got to the grocery store, I'd stopped crying. Mm-hmm. And I realized that's something I never did before. When in my earlier times in my life, when I would cry over something, I'd have a hard time stopping, because I would just keep thinking about the thing, thinking that I needed to work through it somehow. And what I realized, the other day was just let the song play and let yourself cry, but don't think about it. Just leave it alone. And let yourself be, be okay with where you are and let it be. And by the time I got to the grocery store, I went to the grocery store and it was fine. Mm-hmm. So, and I think that's what people get frightened of their thoughts, instead of just realizing that they're just happening. It's like, a bad commercial. You're watching television and suddenly a bad commercial comes on, it's only a few minutes.
Being frightened by your thoughts, Judy, I think that's a powerful statement. As a psychiatrist, I often tell people, you know, there's no thought that ends up people in the psychiatric hospital. They have one thought, and then they have 10,000 thoughts about that thought.
Right.
And that's what does it. And I'll speak from my own experience. When I was first learning, exposed to the principles, whatever, and shortly after I met Judy in Bradenton, Florida, I was up in Tampa for some reason, and I was coming up to a stop sign, and it turned to red for me and green for the people, just as I was coming to the line, and a whole number of people started to cross. And the thought came to me, if I slammed on the accelerator, that I could kill at least 20 people. Mm-hmm. At least 20 people. Now, wow, okay. I said no thanks, and I stopped at the stop sign. But I had learned enough to not try to figure out where that thought was coming from, but just to listen quietly. And what came to me next was, you know, Bill, you are exhausted. You're pushing yourself. You're not getting enough rest. And so it wasn't the content of that thought, but the quality of that thought was giving me information. But the information wasn't try to get that thought of killing 20 people out of your head, or you're a murderer.
Yeah, something wrong with you.
Because if I would have gone that route, like you said, Judy, if I would have gone to fighting that thought, they probably would have found me pulled over, curled up in the fetal position, mumbling, "I'm not a murderer, I'm not a murderer, I'm not a murderer," as they carried me to the emergency room at the local hospital. And I think the same thing happens, and I want us to maybe stop because we've gone about 27 minutes, and we've said we're going to keep these between 25 and 30, and then we'll start back in the next session. But I'd like to hear comments, because I think that often happens, and what we haven't addressed, and I don't know that we need to in details, but a lot of times, if we haven't forgiven ourselves for things that we did, especially those that have had to be in the midst of combat, where the war has craziness to it. I think most would, even those of us that haven't experienced it directly, can. I was reading about the My Lai massacre in our Vietnam War, and the people that stopped it, and how that happened. And anyway, but I think that if we don't know that what you said, Judy, that we don't have to fight it, that it might have information for us, but if we can just get present, it may be as simple as we're exhausted. We're,
Right.
So if it's
it may be as simple as a random memory popped up because the song played,
exactly.
and you can't control that, and it's okay,
So we've gone just under 30 minutes. So with this, if it's okay with everybody, I'm going to say let's stop this section,
Okay.
and then we will be starting up for the next section shortly.